Hi, good evening. This is Manda Little Karoo Oudtshoorn. Hi, how you all doing tonight? Red lipstick for the guy who asked. Hope you enjoy it. No blending tonight. So South Africa and power cuts. Yes, there's a lot of shadows here because I actually have a tiny little solar light which you can see I'm moving up and down. So that's a little bit of battery powered South African light. I'll just take my glasses off so we don't get so much shadows on my face. And you can, watch all the wrinkles. Thank you so much for your support on the reels. It's quite amazing the amount of views that it's had. Facebook has been sending me these like little flag notices going, okay, well, you've just gone past 1,000 on this one, you've just gone past this on that one, and so on and so on. So, well, practicing reels, not really, and posting. And this month, it's mental and emotional spring cleaning. Last month was commemoration, so this month it's spring in South Africa, and so. Yeah, and so what I've been doing is I've been posting poetry, which I wrote, and I'm not posting them in any particular order because they're not. I'm actually going through an incredible amount of documentation because I tend to scribble on things all over the place, and part of what I'm doing at the moment is getting all the raw material in order to finish, number one, the book that I'm currently trying to write. And secondly, I never had the courage before to post these poems. Now, these poems were all written because I had an interaction with a soul that had an impact on me. And these are long ago. And for those who've had more personal conversations with me know that I stay firmly out the arena when it comes to certain things because I just can't relate, can I? And so posting these ones is sort of a way of mentally clearing the decks because I've always professed to not have feelings, or at least very well suppressed feelings. I sort of term it disconnected, which is how I view it. They're not current, or like there's a lot of statements that people make that I can't relate to. I can't find the memory within me. But yet going through these poems, I find myself quite astonished at what I did feel at the time because, well, I wrote a poem about it, and I tend to blurb it out. I'm not one of those writers that sit and agonize over a poem and carefully construct it. It is like the rest of my art. It's literally get on the tsunami, write it, and exactly what I'm feeling at that moment is what will manifest on paper. And then afterwards I'll polish it up a bit and so on and correct it. But it's normally a rush of words that come out of me. And so it's normally very truthful to what I felt at the time. And some of them on the actual scribbles and things, I did date them and I can sort of see from which era they are. And so I'm mixing them up because I do speak 2 languages. Our country, South Africa, has 11 official languages, but I think there's quite a few more dialects that just didn't make it into the official register, sub-dialects and so on. And so one of the languages that I do speak is Afrikaans. And Afrikaans has its roots in quite a few languages, Dutch mostly, obviously, due to Jan van Riebeeck and his ship and everything arriving here, and the Dutch East Indian Company, if I remember correctly, now from school history, which is so far in the past. And then, of course, strong Germanic roots, and there's a whole lot of words from Scottish that made it English. There was English settlers here. There was the French Huguenots that was here. And that's besides, of course, all the slaves that was brought here, that were taken from their countries and brought with these traders, and then settled here and became part of these households, and not just became part of the households, but because of the times that they lived in and slavery being what it was, then became part of our genetic DNA. And so we truly are a rainbow nation made up, and our language roots lies far, but there are languages to this day that, for instance, I understand Dutch well, because it's one of our main roots, you know, and I speak English, and English, well, you know, there was the whole colonial thing and so on and so on, but there was it's one of the main languages in the country and in the world, of course. So that's a language that's easy for me to communicate in. My mom had French roots, and so, or her line had French roots. Let me put it this way: she was several generations removed from the first settlers that came here from the French Huguenots, but she came from the Sillier family, and then the Derubés before that, you know, and they sort of trot back into whichever. I never looked it up. I just know part of the family. And then on my dad's side, well, that's the Germanic lot, you know. So they were the Burgers, and their roots go back down. So you had this mixture of artists, which comes from my mom's side, and the Germanic side, which is a very logical, more Teutonic way of thinking. And if you think German engineering, and you think engineering per se, and logic and strong systems and so on, you know, so that's dad's side. And so I'm a little bit stuck in the middle between those, you know. I have the creativity, which runs in the bloodline, never trained as anything. Did the high school thing and finished high school, and well, let's not say that high school was a delightful experience. It wasn't. So, which brings me to mental and emotional spring cleaning. I have difficulty explaining to people why my emotions are disconnected, and reading these poems and recently going through them and having to face that I actually do have emotions, or had them at least, or felt them intensely, it's slowly sort of brought home to me that, well, the reason why I choose, and it's very much a choose, I remember actually sort of having a visual picture of pushing down a switch and going, no, I'm not entering this arena anymore. And so the person that does share my life, you know, of course, he has a lovely time with that, but he accepts me the way I am, and so we have this very disconnected, disjointed, very unfair relationship, but still he accepts me as what I am and as I am. And so regular questions about how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? You know, and I get many comments about, or not just comments, but romantic declarations or emotional declarations. And since most of my followers tend to be men, which thank you very much, you all make me feel extremely special. But I find myself puzzled, and I had found myself puzzled, extremely puzzled, and I go, what on earth is this bunch seeing in me? Because I don't see it. I just don't see it. And then here and there somebody would remark on something that I've written, or they would leave me a personal message, or reach out to me on the level of something that I did. But a lot of it tends to be about physically what I represent to them. They would remark on my mouth, they would remark on my eyes, and so I firmly became convinced that, you know, this does probably represents to them. Okay, I'm just going to swallow that smile and not say the words, because, you know, I don't want to be banned like a certain person on my friend list who gets shouted at for being a little bit too outspoken. Lovely sense of humor though, so shout out to you. You know who you are. But anyway, so I decided, because I never showed these poems to the world. I compiled them once into 2 anthologies. I did separated the two, the Afrikaans ones and the English ones, and separated my and I did all that work. And recently, with this amount of work stacked up here in front of me, which is part of the reason why I spend so much time at my desk. I've been going through all my notes and things, and there's drafts upon drafts and rework, the first scribbles, you know, the initial outburst. And then there are ones that I retyped and then afterwards changed a word here or there as I fine-tuned it a little bit and read it to myself. But I never had the courage to let those little buggers out and let them see the light of day. And so I thought perhaps it's time. As a writer, after all, I now have to embrace being a writer since I've now gone and published these goddamn books, and I love writing. I loved writing them. I loved making up my own words and my own rhythms and my own sentences and talking about. The first three I wrote in Afrikaans as an acknowledgement of the culture that I come from. I was raised in an Afrikaans speaking family, and to this day, some of my favorite people in the world, one of them being my aunt, the younger sister of my father, doesn't speak a word of English and has great trouble understanding what I say. And if I send her a video that I made, she has no idea what I'm saying. So she just watches my face and going, "Oh, you're looking good," but she says it in Afrikaans, but she doesn't know what I'm saying. And so, and then on the other side, the family that I married into when I was a young girl, they didn't speak Afrikaans, and there was only a very, very, very tiny bit of understanding amongst them, and right up until the end, some of them still didn't speak Afrikaans. And so that's the English side of things. And I, as a youngster myself, overheard once, I was about 9 years old, and I was coming down the passage, and I overheard an argument between my mom and my dad. And my dad was obviously very stressed that day, and I overheard him speak to my mom quite harshly. Actually, he wasn't shouting. My father never swore at people or that, but he was annoyed. You could hear he was annoyed, and I was terrified of my father. He was a very strong personality. And saying to her, why doesn't she correct my speech impediment? So in Afrikaans, you tend to, there's a area in our country called Malmesbury, and people who tend to come from that area, they tend to roll their R's. So they have the very guttural French rolling R. So when you speak English, you don't pronounce your R's the same way as you would do in Afrikaans. And so I decided, listening to him calling it a speech impediment, and that was the word he used, but he used it in Afrikaans. That's fine. If my Afrikaans is not good enough for you, I will now become English. And being 9 years old and quite a determined soul at the time, still am, never changed, I did. Unbeknownst to him at school, I just targeted English friends, and I made an effort. I changed classes unbeknownst to him, because my parents never attended parent-teaching meetings, and there was just this whole absence of involvement. It didn't feature in their lives, and so quite a lot of what I got up to at school never reached them. You know, they were completely and utterly unaware of what I got up to. So unbeknownst to them, by the time I hit high school, I'd actually managed to insert myself into the English classes. Or well, in our country there was an English class per standard or per grade, and the English-speaking kids would be attending the curriculum in English, and the rest of the subject matters that was presented in Afrikaans. So it was very much an Afrikaans school, and finding a school that had an English component to it was quite rare at the time, and not now where you can learn Xhosa and various other languages at school, or get a basic understanding, or learn German or things like that. In my day, you could learn German from a certain stage, but if you chose to take the one subject, you couldn't take the other subject, and there was this whole thing. So I sort of fell at the bus, because I had German for a little bit here, and then the subject matter changed, and so did the language choices. And so I'm comfortable writing in both languages, but I change personalities, which is the interesting thing. And so seeing myself through the eyes of the past, which this month being the mental spring cleaning month, or emotional spring cleaning month. Last month was the emotional breakdown month. This month's the emotional spring cleaning month. chucking out all the goddamn skeletons. Let the bones fall where they may, and they can dance for all I care. I'm looking at myself and realizing that, Amanda, you perhaps might be slightly problematic because it sounds like two different people. And when I speak in the vernacular Afrikaans to my friends and family, I have a different way of speaking than when I speak to my English family. And when I speak to my Afrikaans family, I have a different way of speaking to them. And when I speak to the people currently in my life, which is also in Afrikaans, it's a different vernacular as well. And then there is some of my colleagues. Now, in South Africa, I don't know in the rest of the world, but because of this amalgamation of cultures from all over the world, in the Cape Peninsula itself, this is now from Cape Town up to the Huguenot Mountains, where the first French settlers started their wine farms and this, and there was an awful lot of slaves brought in, but especially from India. And so there's a very strong culture there of what's called the Cape Flats. And it's called the Cape Flats because there's an area that's really, really, really flat. And now there's a lot of people that are settled there that's also from different cultures. But back in my day, there are people there and they are called coloured. But it's not because of their skin colour. It is because of, if I could call it, tribal identity. And they are very different. They're extremely different from people that are Afrikaans speaking. That's also a conglomeration of genetic DNA mixture. So in other words, they're not like because this is a true tribe, a nation by themselves. The Zulus, the same, the Pedi, they all have their own tribal identities. But the coloured nation was made here by this amalgamation. And there is nothing I enjoy more than their sense of humour. And if you grew up in the area, in that particular area, then, and they have a way of speaking, which if you are Afrikaans and you say, for instance, you live in Pretoria, which is, well, yeah, I think it's called Tshwane now. Not that I keep up with name changes and things, I just lose wherever I am. But anyway, so Johannesburg, Pretoria, which is now Gauteng and Tshwane. So if you come up from that area and you grew up in that, you would know Hillbrow well, you would know that type of speaking. And if you went down to Cape Town and you knew those people there, it would be almost a different kind of humour. It's a different kind of humour, it's a different kind of language. It's sort of subdeveloped, as a sub-language. And I find myself switching between all these like a chameleon and finding a home, a word home, because I can relate. Because there was a time when I lived up in Potchefstroom, which falls now in the Northwest Province. It used to be the Transvaal in the old days, which means trans means to cross, and the Vaal was the river, so to cross the Vaal River, so the area on the other side of that. But it's now known as Northwest Province, and so people there tended to be not of that. So that was getting to know a whole different kind of sense of humour and a different way of speaking and a different set of values and a different way. And it was bizarre. And now reading all these poems, I can relate to words and I can relate to that so easily. But these words are my words. I wrote these goddamn words. And I'm finding myself in a country of words that I created, my language, and made up some words, which being a writer I'm allowed to do, and being a poet, well, whatever makes sense to you. And since I never trained as anything, well, no rules apply, do they? The handle right off that runaway horse. I just let that ink rip and off I go. It's the bizarrest thing to try and find myself between this, and yet I'm all of that. And I look at my books and I've started rereading some of the chapters and I go, I wrote that. And I'm looking at myself as this study in not conflicting. It's just there's so many people populating me, so many identities populating me. So if anybody ever gets confused, and like I was recently criticized on I talk too much, oh, I haven't even started. I'm so sorry, but you are in for a deluge. So this was tonight's deluge and the explanation about the poetry, mixing it up and letting you see what I used to feel. Don't know if I'll ever will again or if it will ever happen to me, but the work is valid, and so I'll stand by that. And for you that reads it and do compliment me or encourage me, and the Bloemfontein Skrywersvereniging, Jesus, julle ouens is great hoor. Julle is fantasties. Ek woon nie in Bloemfontein nie, ek is nie naby julle nie, and you just embrace me. So thank you so much for that. Dankie vir julle aanmoediging, and also for the lovely comments I get from you and the lovely responses. So that's just a shout out to the Bloemfonteinse Skrywersvereniging, and which means Bloemfontein's Writers Organisation, Vereniging, well, gathering, get together, but a bunch of writers, that specifically. So bless you all. Enjoy the language journey and the emotional journey this month, and yeah, you'll see there was an awful lot of people that had an awful lot of impacts at one point or another, because each of the poems is about a person or an interaction with maybe the same person, but feelings. So that's me for the night, and yes, we're doing the video by solar light. You can hear generators running in the background. Neighbors we had break-ins this week, 2 or 3 nights ago, you know, because the area where I stay is quite a poor area, and so we have gangs roaming the streets. They come in like groups of 5, got their fighting dogs on the leashes, you know, walks around with knives, and if you think you're going down to the local little convenience store to pick up bread, well, I can think again, you know. We have things like meth heads and stuff hanging around. As a matter of fact, my diagonal neighbours behind me is a bunch of meth heads. And so we have a very interesting environment. And so this picture that you see of me, so nicely and controlled, well, just remember, it's always, pictures are deceptive. It's just a face and a brain, you know. So, but yes, so a couple of nights ago, because of the rolling blackouts, they tend to target the houses that are, and I live in a tiny little studio, and since last year I had to make a plan very fast to make myself a home, and that story I will tell another day. Okay, so urban survival coming up as one of the topics, and how to make a house out of cardboard, fabric, poles, zinc, mud, whatever lies to hand, just to have a shelter. So, been there, done that, and had a tree as a bathroom, a shower. Imagine that. I now have pictures to prove it. So, you guys enjoy the journey through the poetry, and leave me some comments. Tell me what you think, or if you felt it, or if you can relate to it, or if you've ever felt like that. I would love to know. Perhaps I'm not the only one on the planet that ever had those feelings, so I would appreciate that. So here's a smile for you. Take it with you and spread it as far as you can go, and be blessed, and see you when the power comes on again.